So welcome to the first community office hours for PipeRider. It's the code review tool for DBT. And we hope to be doing this a little bit more often. It's the first time we've done it, but I hope it's going to become more of a regular thing. Probably going to coincide with each release of PipeRider, which is every other Thursday. But at the very least once a month, hopefully with every PipeRider release. Okay, so yeah, my name's Dave Flynn. I'm the tech advocate with PipeRider Project. You can find me on Twitter. That's @Dave Flynn. And joining me today is CL Gao, which is our CEO, and he's on Twitter too. Hey, CL. And we also have a special guest today, which is Spencer from Sudo Labs. He's the head technologist there. And Spencer, nice for you to join us. Spencer's going to be talking about how he uses DBT and Snowflake with reporting and importantly, automation to help early startups iterate better. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Spencer, yeah. All right, so first thing I want to do is a quick, let you know what you can expect from these community updates, from these open office hours. So the first thing will be a community update, and that's how we're doing in the community, where you can find us, and where you can follow along with what we're doing here with PipeRider. We'll have the latest from the new release of PipeRider. So this week we've got 0.27. We've got the new features that come with that version. As I said, we've got a guest today who's Spencer Ellinor. Then we're going to have a little bit of Q&A. We've put the question out to people. Do they have any questions about PipeRider? We have a few questions listed here. And then if we have time, we're going to look at some interesting content. There's no shortage of content, interesting content to read about data. So we have a couple of articles we'd like to share with you. So the first thing is the community update. So these are the places you can find out more about PipeRider and get involved in the community. So the first is we're on Twitter, which is @GetPipeRider. It's a brand new account here. So we kind of created a new account specifically for PipeRider. So we need more followers over there. So if you're on Twitter, please @GetPipeRider and give us a follow. But if you left Twitter recently for some reason, or you just prefer Mastodon, that's fine too. We're over on Fastodon. We're @PipeRider over there. And our main community is Discord. So if you want to get involved in the community, you have a question about using PipeRider, want to ask about a feature, then Discord is probably the best place. And the good thing about Discord is developers will often respond directly to questions over there. So that's a great thing. And of course, we're on GitHub. So we're open source. We encourage you to open issues, submit feature requests, submit a pull request if you want to contribute. And currently we're on 356 stars. So we need your help to get more stars. If you're using PipeRider, considering using it, or just love open source, please give us a star over on GitHub. Big news last week was we finally got our official DBT Slack channel. So if you're a DBT user, you've probably been to the DBT Slack to ask for help already. And now you can find PipeRider in the tools-piperider. We have a new, the channel is called tools-piperider. So you're welcome to ask for help and share your experiences. And we'll be posting news of important updates and stuff about PipeRider. So check back there often. Right, so today we're going to be talking about PipeRider 0.27, the new features that come with that. So as I mentioned a moment ago, we release every other Thursday, and 0.27 came out on the 15th, which is last Thursday. So you can expect another release coming up next week. Today's the 20th, so it's going to be Thursday after next. Today we're going to look at 3 aspects of PipeRider that come with 0.27 or recent updates which are important. The first of those is we have a new streamlined workflow for DBT, which brings a frictionless way to add PipeRider to your existing DBT projects. We've improved the comparison summary, so you can more quickly see the highlight of changes between your development branch and your main branch. That's been improved a lot. And lastly, we have a new feature, which is very interesting, is the Lineage Diff. And this is a way to visually compare the DBT lineage graph before and after you've made changes. So it'll be your main branch and your development branch. So we'll just take a quick look at these in more detail. So streamlined process for DBT. So from PipeRider 25, it's no longer been necessary to initialize PipeRider in a DBT project. You literally, you'll be working on your dev branch. It's literally just install PipeRider with the connector, tag your models. And if you've worked in DBT before, then tagging is quite easy. And then directly just run PipeRider compare. There's no other config necessary. So it's very easy to add it to an existing project. If you're already working on a development branch, you can just add PipeRider and quickly compare your changes to main. Comparison summary. So first off, it's if you've not seen PipeRider, the comparison summary is a markdown formatted summary of the differences between your development branch and the main branch. And it's a way to get an overview of the changes. So the purpose is to be attached to the pull request comment. So you'd either manually do that, or ideally it'd be automatically done by the CI process, such as GitHub workflow. And in 0.27, it's been improved to show the changes more clearly. So previously we showed a lot of statistics about the differences, but it wasn't easy to quickly see those changes. So now you can see it's very easy to see information like in the base and target. So the base would be main, the target will be the development branch. You can see the build time, the number of tests, row and column count, the number of new columns, and the percentage changes between duplicate and missing values. All right, so columns, as always, we have the column types there, and it's easier now to see the percentage difference between the base and target. And then I think brand new for 0.27 is the inclusion of DBT metrics inside the comparison summary, so you can get a quick overview of if your metrics have been affected by the most recent changes. So, right, Lineage Diff. So the next feature, the third one, is Lineage Diff. So I think as a DBT user, everyone will be familiar with DBT's lineage graph, and it uses a DAG to visualize the structure of your project. And it's great for getting an overview of your project. Now with PipeRider, we're all about understanding change. So we took the idea of the DBT lineage graph and we added on a way for you to easily see the changes that have occurred in the lineage graph between your development, the main branch and your development branch. So you can get a full overview of your project with the changes highlighted. So as I said, there's a full overview of the lineage graph. And then you can also view only the changes that have occurred. And additionally to this, we also have extra statistics available, so you can see the build time of each model and also the row count change. So it's a great way to kind of get an overview of the changes visually. So if you want to see the change, how the change looks, how changes are being affected by upstream or affected downstream, the Lineage Diff is a great feature. So we're going to look at a scenario in a moment that kind of ties all this together, and like in a story, it's easier to follow. But first, the Lineage Diff, actually I need to mention, is exclusive to PipeRider Cloud. So it's a cloud exclusive feature, but cloud is free and easy to use. We have a free tier, and there is a limit on the number of reports, but it's very unlikely you'd hit that limit as a small team. So cloud comes with some great features such as uploading and sharing reports. You can create workspaces for your team, generate comparisons online, and then obviously the Lineage Diff. And then in the future, there'll be some other kind of cloud exclusive features. And to sign up, all you got to do is run PipeRider Cloud sign up from the CLI. You'll be prompted to enter your email address, and then you can log in, get an API key. It's very quick and easy to do. And you can check the documentation page here for more information. All right, so I want to show a scenario now that kind of ties these three aspects, these three features together. So how it looks like in practice. And the example here is based on DBT's Java Shop project, which is a very common example project. It's kind of the de facto example project that DBT uses. And any code, any example pull requests that you see here are available in our Java Shop fork here. So I'll provide links later on for you to go and check it out for yourself. Okay, so let's look. The scenario you want to look at, it would be a data engineer adding an extra dimension table to their star schema. So in this case, we've added an order status dimension table, and that is in turn used to generate the orders model. So order status is things like is the order completed, returned, shipped, and so forth. So the point of these scenarios is to illustrate how PipeRider would help in uncovering a problem in the code. So of course, the code here has deliberate problems. So let's take a look at how you might discover this issue using PipeRider. So after making the code change, we run PipeRider compare from our dev branch and check how the code changes stack up. So the first thing we're going to do is open the report. And then we can see from the sidebar, project sidebar overview here, we could quickly see that, okay, we have a new raw status seed has been added, that there is a new staging table for status, and we have a change to the orders table. And then looking over to the tables overview on the right, we can see, okay, there's a row count difference in the orders table. So at the bottom here, we have a show graph button. This is the brand new feature. This is a brand new button that you need to press to see the Lineage Diff feature. So we pull up the Lineage graph, and that will show us the changes compared to main branch. So we're looking at change view now. So we can see that the new tables are the new seeds and staging tables are in green here. And then the affected tables and the affected metrics are on the right-hand side here. So if we enable the row count metric, we can see that actually, we're missing 2 rows from the main branch. So the development branch code has caused 2 rows to disappear somewhere. So something's up in the code. So we can see that right here. And then just quickly, here's the all nodes view. So you can prove that everything else is unaffected. There's no other changes here. Literally, it's this lineage right here. From the statuses seed to the staging table to the orders table model. So we know that the change is really confined to the recent code changes that we made. So we go back and look at the code, we'd say, right, we have issues with the code here. So we know there's a deliberate issue. We're missing the return pending status. And also we had an inner join instead of a left join. So it's a simple mistake, but a scenario that illustrates how you would use PipeRider during development to catch errors. And I mentioned the comparison summary earlier, which is a feature of the when you would be submitting a pull request. So imagine you didn't spot this error during development. You submit the pull request. The person who's reviewing that pull request would still get the comparison summary, and they will be able to be alerted to that change, and then hopefully they would catch that issue before it made it through to production. All right, so other scenarios, it could include stuff like performance impact. So on the left here, we got, for instance, a deduplication code resulting in adverse performance. So the build time here for the orders staging table is increased by a huge amount. So there's probably something needs to be checked there. And then over on the right hand side, we got here for you might have some kind of source migration or upstream change that results in a row discrepancy downstream. We can see here for some reason we have an extra row in this join table. So that might be something we want to inspect. Now, these pull requests are available online, as I said, so you can check the links. You can see the code that caused the change. You can view the comparison summary all online. These are all public pull requests, so please, if you're interested in how this works, go and check those out. All right, so that's the PipeRider features out of the way. I introduced Spencer earlier, so he's our guest today. Spencer is the head technologist at Sudo Labs. And he's well experienced in a wide range of areas like software, DevOps, data, and machine learning. And Spencer's come today to talk with us about how he uses dbt and Snowflake together with reporting to help early stage startups to understand their business better. And during this process, Spencer mentioned he sets up automation and related safety steps or guardrails to help the business iterate better. So CL, you met actually Spencer in person recently in Taipei. So I guess I'll let you kind of say hi to Spencer and take it from here.
That's right. Thank you, Dave. Thanks, Spencer, for joining us. Right. So yeah, I enjoyed our conversation when you were here, and it's like a lot of nuggets, best practices that you put in for a lot of the DBT projects you had. So like, why don't you start with giving us an overview about kind of how you started to use DBT, and then what's the kind of the best thing you found, and the missing bits.
Yeah, well, yeah, DBT is definitely a revolution in like data management. And it's such a simple concept, and it's just a natural, seems like an obvious evolution of the practices that people typically have that was needed. I'd always see people with, a cron job creating views, and
Right.
now we have like a system for it, which is like clearly all the data analysts had their own system and it kind of worked, but now we have like an actual system, like the templates, and just having something to run the graph makes a lot of sense. So it's been great to kind of get ramped up and introduce DBT to a lot of people. In terms of like how I view setting it up and setting infrastructure for others, it comes from a background of DevOps that I have prior to data work, and a very strictness of trying to bring something into place and as best as possible eliminate an entire class of problem. So when I set things up, I lean towards strictness. And for instance, like DBT has a warn error argument to all their commands. Whenever possible, I use that. So if there's any warnings, any deprecations, anything from DBT, the build fails. Just to make sure deprecations and warnings are taken care of up front, instead of like 2 years later, we're like, oh no, they deprecated something, or it's been removed from DBT, now all our pipelines break. I make sure I try to set teams up to take care of those early instead of getting bitten by them later. So that's like an example of some of like one thing of how I set it up for others. Because it's largely when I'm bringing it into place and bringing it to people that don't necessarily know DBT. Because this is a fairly new tool, and if someone's coming into an existing org that doesn't have a data literacy or a data team at all, they don't have that infrastructure. So part of that setup is putting as strict guidelines as I can around their development environment. And then as they grow and learn how to use everything, they can be the consenting adult to turn off the safety features as they need.
Sure.
So like things like when they're starting out, right? An example safety feature I add that typically gets turned off fairly quickly. And also depending on the business's data needs, it'll get turned off. Would be like when a modified model is an incremental model, it just gets full refreshed immediately. So whenever any change happens to a full refresh, to an incremental model, we just full refresh it in the PR, or not in the PR, but when we merge it, it just gets full refreshed immediately. Some cases that's not always that great if you're making a fair amount of changes to that model, because it can put tremendous time into the deployments. Like if it's a 100 million row model of event clickstream data and so forth, it's not so great to full refresh that every time you make a change. But once all the changes go in, then out of band we can do a full refresh, be the adults in the room to make that happen.
Yeah, it's just like a lot of the different levels of maturity is how you're used to the tool, right? And then so I think just like what are some of the like the thing that you put in like kind of help the analyst or the other people that use that to prevent things from happening?
Other things to prevent stuff from happening, I guess, like, I think another, like, there's two types of things I look for, right? That's errors that they can introduce to the system because they don't quite understand how things work, or errors that can arise from like natural use. So like some of those would be like making sure It's not so hard these days, but making sure all like the DBT runs, like all the steps are going in order. That's much easier now because DBT has the build command, but in the past you didn't have that. So like that naive approach of just DBT run, you'd break it up into running the source tests first before running your models, because if the source have broken data, then none of your models can reasonably correct. So you should just stop the build when the tests fail on the sources. You don't have to do that anymore because DBT build will handle that. But probably one of the bigger things I introduce, especially Snowflake leveraging their clone functionality, is doing a blue-green sort of deployment where I clone all of the production warehouse into another database and then run DBT on the clone and then test there, everything will work. And then once that's all good working as part of the deployment, I just change the names. And then everything is updated.
Do you ever
Yeah,
do you
go ahead.
ever have any pushback in implementing best practices, or do you find that people or teams are open to taking on board your advice?
Typically, I haven't had to compete with existing teams,
Right.
fortunately. I mean, in some cases, the approach I try to showcase all the benefits of using DBT and I incentivize them to use it more. That's typically what I try to do, go with a carrot rather than a stick.
Okay.
So DBT makes it easy to do this, right? Because I have the code review, the pull
Yeah.
request workflow, and DBT docs. So I just set that up and fully integrate those things. So they can get a lot of benefit just by being in the ecosystem. You know, by playing along, they get all these documentation. That's very nice and useful.
Right.
So yeah, in some cases you can have a problem of folks not necessarily wanting to be on board, but I'm not being introduced to companies in a capacity where I am like managing them.
Right.
Right. I'm interfacing with like the head tech guy or the head of product or the CEO, for instance, and you know, they ask me to set something up and they can kind of get the team in line and they can see the benefits. But yeah, I mean, I try to provide a lot of safety, and usually that is the big thing. And then once they learn, they can kind of take off the guardrails as they see fit. And that's usually how it goes. And that's how I want it to go, is I want it to be overly strict rather than, you know, I mean, it's a grand philosophy of how data should work in an organization. Ultimately, you're building a product for your own company. And if you introduce or allow errors at a, you know, somewhat frequent rate internally, you lose confidence in your data and your data systems. And that results in like people doing okay, let me ask for a new report every time I want data, and I'll just use that as my source of truth, or finding ways to get answers to their questions that don't involve the data systems so that they can, you know, feel confident in some numbers. Yeah, bypass the entire data infrastructure, and they, you know, get an Excel document that has all the order data, and they make their own reports, and it's the whole completely, you know, makes all the data infrastructure and data systems, well, useless. They don't do anything, valueless.
It's super surprising how often that actually happens, like especially even in very established places. So I want to touch on like you mentioned like the pull request flow for DBT project. I think this is a great thing that the tool enabled, right? I think there are a couple of challenges that we see. Like one is the testing environment, and then you have this blue-green for deployment, right? So like kind of for a lot of teams, like managing a separate kind of testing area for the PR. Did you find it a challenge, or is like you have a standard recipe to setting up?
I have a pretty standard recipe. I mean, Snowflake, I think, really makes it really, really easy for this. Just the ability to clone production is fairly straightforward. really the tricky part is making sure you can get like deterministic names for each PR without like breaking Snowflake, like without including characters that that Snowflake doesn't allow in database names. But just
Right.
cloning production for each branch and then running your changes against the from that branch against it. Snowflake is the main reason why it's easy. There are some things I'm looking at to speeding up the clone process. Cloning the database with a lot of objects currently takes a while, but I'm trying to. It's technically faster to like clone each table individually, but I just haven't done that yet.
Is there a time that you have to kind of sample the production data because it's like not feasible?
Yeah. So in some cases, what I'll do is like the PR target is a separate target from development and from main. And so in those cases, we might introduce like, blocks or conditions in the base models to limit during a PR or sample the data. Like if we're doing like event data, that's like for sessionization, we're going to look at, say, the last month of data instead of the last 3 years of data, that sort of thing. But of course that, makes data testing hard. I mean, data testing in general is hard.
Yeah.
And there's just like, it's almost like a philosophical question of how do I know the data is wrong, or is the data doing what it's supposed to be doing? So it's hard to guard against. I try to do as much to I try to handle as many of the stuff that I can handle, and everything else, there's not much you can do there. You just kind of have to feel confident. Like, at least what I do is when you have tests failing in your PR, your entire copy of the data warehouse is still up, and you can look at it and see where did it go wrong, right? You can dig into it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I think this is like an emerging practice for treating like the data part more like software engineering, and then having all that rigor set up. But one interesting thing is like dbt enabled is also the huge ecosystem. The downstream consumption of these data is by nature in the data systems. It's like, okay, you might see this in an ML system or some dashboard, right? So last I checked, I think you had an interesting way of like tagging queries in the dashboard and then trying to detect if your model change actually affects something people care about, right? So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. The last little bit in terms of like safety that we're introducing, and this came later on in our projects because we were integrating with visualization system. So we were using Superset at the time. But we were trying to find a way, like we were iterating a lot on figuring out how to make it safe to make changes because we wanted to avoid dashboards breaking, which is probably the most loud, error that can arise is, okay, we get a message from so-and-so, hey, the dashboard's not updating, or the dashboard's blank or something. Hello? That sort of problem is not so great. So I think the approach that we ended up taking was, or one thing that we're looking at was using the query tags in Superset, like updating like Superset has a query mutator function that you can put in the configurator. And we were adding query tags to all the Superset queries that were made, if they were related to a dashboard. And then we would use that to determine historically dashboard related queries and to see if they would be affected by model changes. And it's not really easy to say, this change will affect it. What we have is these changes affect these models, and we tell you in a PR, like, oh, you have, 5 dashboards to be affected by this change. Like, you should probably check that first. And we don't really have, it would be nice if we could just say automatically, these are all the things that are going to break, but it's just a correlation.
Right.
That's all we have.
At least that's on the impact path, right?
Yeah.
That's
the closest we got, but there could be more heavier introspection and like SQL parsing and stuff like that, but we're trying to go for simple.
Yeah. So I think it's really like the balance of the amount of effort and then kind of the rigor you want to get to. So for that example, I'm just also curious, like, and then given that the PR could be having its own test database living for a while, did you get to have the superset pointing to the PR database to look at the impacts, or is this like
No, we did not. We didn't manage to set that up, though. I guess you could do that. It's just what's missing in visualization is data, like dashboard development with a, keen eye towards like actual typical software development, like GitHub, like pull requests or GitHub merge requests, whichever you prefer. Like all of these, the development methodology into like you have a main branch and you make pull requests against it or something along that line, whether main or develop, right? Having this second branch of code and having my systems operate in that context temporarily so I can validate my changes. Like everything needs to have this, and visualization tools don't. Like,
Right.
so like it's just dramatically so they don't have it. It's very actually difficult to even reasonably construct such a system to make that work. It would require, I think, pretty heavy customization of superset to introduce this sort of thing. For instance, superset is just the example that I've worked on most recently, and it's open source, so I could do it. It's just Django. We can make it happen, but it would be kind of complicated.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all this
Yeah.
criticism. It's like, what are the kind of advice for you would give to people just trying to adopting DBT?
Trying to adopt DBT. I think, DBT itself is very easy to do, very easy to set up. Even if you're just manually running DBT, you don't even have the capabilities or understand GitHub Actions. Like just having a process to run it, I think is great to get started. And even just using the structure to get yourself organized on data, even on a team of one, is just I think just definitely the right way to do it. I think, I don't know if there's many resources on it now, but I think trying to consume information about proper data modeling, I think that's probably one of the bigger ones that I see hard for people to be truly effective with DBT and set themselves up for like success and like getting things done, I think quickly and setting themselves up for the future of like sort of analysis tasks is understanding, facts and dimensions, typical warehousing terminology, and like the data modeling strategies is probably, I think there might be not so much literature on it. I mean, of course you can hit, the Bibles, the data warehousing toolkit books, and try to get an understanding of how those work. But even in this, that's not exactly one-to-one with the modern data warehousing and DBT, especially with DBT utils. You can set up a lot of like really convenient like date spines and all that good stuff to like set up all your metrics to work as you'd want. But that's like, I think, yeah, data modeling is I think a big thing.
Underrated.
Yeah, it's underrated. I find it one of the things I get asked about most often is how should I make this work? Or one thing that I have to look at to help others is I see the result of the work and I go, oh, I wouldn't have done it that way. And let me give you some, it's a learning experience. I have to teach them like, oh no, you can actually break this, piece of logic out into its own model and share that across all these different areas. Or, oh, you've just constructed just like the exact current view of like that aggregation where we should actually just do it now. Let's go ahead and do it by day. Just have a daily aggregate, and then you can just sum up those values when you want to look at it. Like it's very easy, but you can set up these grains to make analysis in the future very easy without having to rework anything.
Right.
But just getting familiar with like the powers of the data warehouse. and data modeling, I think is probably most useful. I'm just seeing if there's anything else in the noggin about what I would teach others, or what would have people focus on first. But I think that's pretty. I think those are the main things in my opinion.
There's actually a like dimensional modeling guide for DBT. I mean, written by Jonathan Neal. So I think that's a useful resource for people getting started. Just like, oh, knowing the tool is so cool, but the essence or the semantic for how you should model data is really like what the tool enables you, right? And that's the core things that we need to get familiar with. All right, thank you so much, Spencer. I really enjoyed the chat.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Spencer. Tell me, is there anywhere that people, if they're watching or listening, they can find out more about you? Do you have a website or somewhere you want to promote that people can hear more from you?
Yeah, we have a website, sudolabs.co, and it's mainly a BD website for like clients. So there isn't a whole lot there for people interested, but and me particularly, but I don't have really much of a social presence, but you can, ping me on LinkedIn, Spencer Ellinor, you'll see maybe my face with that dog that I took, a decade ago, but maybe I should update it.
I know it's on my slide here. So you're open if people want to ping you on LinkedIn and ask some advice or something, you're open to kind of connecting and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. That'd be great. I guess additionally, we're currently working through interview processes in Taiwan for DBT practitioners. So if you're interested or want to use DBT professionally, it'd be great to talk.
All right. Well, we'll help you spread the word.
Thank you.
Cool.
All right. Thank you. I'll just, I've got a few questions here, CL, so let me just reshare here. So a couple of questions I'm reading out here from the Slack. Someone's asking, how can they determine from the PipeRider report what's important for them to care about? And this is an interesting question because obviously we surface changes in the report from the development branch and the main branch, but there's a great feature, DBT metrics, which is a way for the user to define what is important to them. So they can use, they can define the metric and the grain, and then PipeRider can show the metric and also compare the metric and show that there's a difference between the metrics. So I actually have a report over here. This is the one from the, so this is the report from the scenario that I just showed a little bit earlier. So you can see it's got the graph with the changes in here. And actually, sorry, Sal?
The incorrect join, right?
Yeah, this is the one with the missing value in the source table and the incorrect join. Yeah. So we actually also show the metrics, and you can see the metric comparison. So I think this is a unique feature of PipeRider, which is actually showing these metrics and then doing the metric comparison. So you would see that there's been a change to the orders table, and that's also influenced or affected the metric, the DBT metric here, and you can see how that's affected it between the base and the target. So it's up to the user. They can define how they want to, what they want to track, what metrics they're interested in, and then PipeRider can also surface those changes.
The thing really, like in PR review, is really we want to help people catch like unintended changes.
Right.
And also ensure the intended changes are there, right? But the question is that it's just so much like it's data, so it's lots of impact to the data, and then what's the useful signal that you need to let the user know, as opposed to all the noise. Like if you do like row by row, and then it's like, okay, it's a lot of change. What does it mean, right? And then if you do profile, okay, boundary change, what does it mean? So having a way that telling the user, okay, if you define matrix, this is something you probably don't want to rewrite history about, right? So this is one of the things we do. And then also like from the conversation with Spencer, I think like how do we get to some of the external system downstream superset or other things via query tagging, log analysis, and then kind of what's the impact for things that the user really care about. I think this is what we want to work on next.
Yeah, Well said. Yeah, and also these I had a link here. So the all of the, as I mentioned, all the pull requests that you see here, you see the report or the comparison summary, they're all available here. So actually the particular example we're showing just now with that report is the add the order status table. So you can see here the team's been working on demonstrating this example. So you can see the comparison summary here and some of the lineage. So I know that's available for all of the pull requests that we've been working on scenarios.
I think we should turn this into a gallery of bad SQL, right?
Yeah, probably that's a good idea.
Spencer, do you have any like sample for that bad SQL that we put in there?
Ooh, I've had a couple tricky ones. A lot of them, it's like digging in the Snowflake query profiler, and I have to like tweak a query, break it up a little bit to take advantage of parallelism, and go. I took a 6-minute query to like 30 seconds.
Right.
But hard to find those.
Yeah. Well, let us know if you have anything in mind. Yeah. Do you have any more questions, Dave?
Yeah, there's another one here. Someone's asking, is PipeRider automated? So the answer to that is GitHub Actions is fully supported. We do have an action in the GitHub marketplace. So I can pull over another window here. So we do have the PipeRider compare action in the GitHub Actions marketplace. So it's well documented, very easy to use. If you're at the stage where you need to automate your tests and you want to test pull request code against main, then PipeRider, the GitHub action is the way to go for that, for sure.
I think we need to figure out how to do this, the part of the Snowflake clone as part of the recipe. So
yeah. And yeah, definitely. So that's not included, obviously, in the documentation here, but that would be a tutorial on that would be very useful. Yeah.
And welcome any contributions.
Yeah, definitely. And lastly, I've got a question here, which is, do I need a paid account to use the Lineage Diff? So I mentioned earlier that you don't need a paid account. There is a free tier for PipeRider Cloud. So there is a limit on report uploading, but you're very unlikely to hit that in a small team. So it's essentially free to use the Lineage Diff. You're probably not going to bump up against any limits there. All right, so that's the questions we have. So I just want to finish up by looking at a few articles, which kind of, there's always a lot to read related to data. It seems data engineers love to write about what they're doing. And a couple of articles here, which kind of stood out over the last few weeks here. And I wanted to kind of share those with everybody. So the first is Lily Chang's article. And she wrote a really detailed post here about, she works for Policy Genius, and they created an in-house solution for testing. And she talked about, it's a very in-depth post. I would definitely advise anybody who's implementing this kind of system to read it. She talks about difficulties in testing and how they changed their way of thinking about testing, how they developed an in-house testing solution. And CL, you'll probably be excited to know, they talked a lot about shifting left, which you wrote about recently. So the early testing often. Methodology is actually based on the assumption what we just talked about with Spencer a moment ago, where you don't always have access to a full clone of production data. You might be using some segment of that data. It turns out they're not using DBT. Actually, I did message Lily on LinkedIn, and she said they're not using DBT, but they're thinking about it in the future. So in that regard, I think PipeRider could be, if they're using DBT, PipeRider could be a good fit for this kind of situation. And the second is by Ben Stansel. So everybody probably knows who Ben is. He's he's heavyweight in the blogging, data blogging community. And he writes here about, the title of the post is all I want to know is what's different. And it really fits with like what we've been talking about today. And the main quote really is that the easiest way to see if a metric is correct is to make sure it matches, what it was previously as it was yesterday. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here. What CL and Spencer have mentioned today is we want to make sure that any changes that we're making are not having adverse effects. That if there is a change, is what we wanted, and if there isn't, if there is a change, is what we wanted, yeah. But if we didn't want to see a change, we want metrics to match how they were previously. You know, that would be ideal. So it's a good, these are both two very good reads, definitely worth checking out. So if you have if you come across any interesting blog articles, you know, please post them on our Discord or share them on the PipeRider tools channel and Slack channel. We're interested to hear if you've read anything interesting. Yeah, so that's about it. So CL, have you got anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, it's like in Ben's this article is further discussion on data contract, which is pretty hot topic these days. And then obviously that's kind of the right way to do it. And then but I mean, you don't always get the luxury to have everything like perfectly agreed upon in complex organizations. So I think it's like a lot of things. It's like you have to start with something pragmatic, and it's like checking the diff is something we can start with, and then if the tools like just enable that, and then you can get an immediate benefit, right? And then so I like diff a lot. I work on version control system before Git, and then I also build like it's kind of Congress build diff tool to show people like what's the proposed build changing laws, or so yeah, I like diff a lot. So it's like really seeing like, okay, here are the matrices you define. Okay, now you're causing changes. You're causing change to history. So do you want that? So this is like something pretty intuitive from like, I guess from software engineering. It's like, okay, diff, and then okay, what's the downstream diffs, like all the way down to anything that you care about, right? So yeah, I think lots of fruitful thoughts, and then it's definitely super exciting time, and then lots of the tooling and then opportunities that is all about making people more productive for working with data.
Awesome, thanks. So thanks again, Spencer, for joining us. We hope, you know, it was a great chat. Actually, we hope maybe we can have more chats in the future if you're open to it.
Sure.
So all right, so I guess we'll leave it there for today. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.